It's always what I do admire about you in particular, that unlike some other deputies, you will put forward costed ways in which funding can be raised. You and I really differ about the consequences of them. The FTT is the classic example of one. The FTT is actually, I believe, likely to be implemented in some European Union member states across the coming years. I believe that will happen. I believe from the point of view of having an open economy like our own, that has a very strong financial services sector within it, I believe the consequences of us bringing in an FTT at the moment would be very negative for jobs and in financial services in our country. And I believe that whatever potential revenue we may gain, which I believe would be short-lived, from bringing in an FTT, would be very, very quickly eroded by the consequences of employment loss in a very important part of the modern Irish economy. In relation to your second point regarding labour market participation issues, I think you're right, actually, and I think something that we are going to have to reflect upon is what all of those who are already living in our country, but, for example, who are not participating in our labour market for all kinds of different reasons, we have to refocus in on how we can encourage them to work if that's what they want to do.
Deputy Tommy Broughan.
Just in relation to scenario B, it's just a couple of lines here in the report in front of us, but I mean, how much detailed work, or is there detailed work being done on that? We have two major proposals about the stabilisers, the automatic stabilisers, and then helps for areas of our economy that will be profoundly affected. But in effect, like, I mean, is there a sort of an alternative disaster, if you like, budget strategy being prepared there? Is there some detailed work on that? So that's just the first thing. Just secondly, in relation to that as well, will our net contribution to the European Union, for example, in 2020, therefore be higher? And is that one of the costs? That's one of the costs that we're going to have as one of the 27 we're going to have to bear. And just ask you again, echoing what the colleague here has said, like, is there a situation though where, obviously the green issues, the carbon taxation issues, but one of the positive sides of that is that it may well provide you with more resources in enabling the tax base to be broadened, while of course I would strongly argue for a tax, for a dividend and for the protection of the most vulnerable in society. And just to ask you about controlling the health budget in particular, we get reports that the recruitment embargo in the HSE, which I think was supposed to end at the start of this month, hasn't ended. And is that something like that your department would have an input into, that you're able to, if you like, direct the new Director General of HSE to continue an embargo beyond the time in which, I mean, is that the kind of cost control that you're going to have? And just lastly, just on the overheating situation, I mean, again, it's very hard to square that, Minister, with what we have to do in rebuilding Ireland, with our infrastructure development and so on. And I mean, how does that add up? Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. So, in relation to the embargo that you've described it as, yes, we are involved in decisions in relation to health recruitment and retention. That is part of what my job is as Minister for Public Expenditure. What we are simply saying, and to reiterate what Minister Harris has said, is that we are saying that government departments, when they have a budget available for the number of people that they are going to recruit, they need to stay within that budget. And that is the case for the Department of Education. It's the case for any other department that has a large number of people working for it. And that is the sum total of what we are looking to do, and what Minister Harris and I are looking to do together. In relation to your point about what planning is now underway to deal with the different consequences of a disorderly Brexit, we were planning for some of that in the run-up to March. Clearly, we've had an opportunity to continue with that work. You used the phrase disaster planning. I don't want to understate for a moment the huge difficulty that we will face if a disorderly Brexit occurs. But I do want to emphasise that in the scenario of that happening, we still, I believe, will have over 2 million people at work in our economy. We still will have a diverse economy that's providing work for a huge number of our citizens that is at the moment at an all-time high. But we will have parts of our country and parts of our economy that are going to face real significant challenges. And that is why I'm saying that when we make a decision in relation to that in September, it will have very important policy consequences for what we go to do. In relation to the overheating challenge that you've raised, Deputy, you're right, this is a balancing act that we need to get, we need to walk, because on one hand we need to ensure that we're making progress in building more homes, but on the other hand we have to try and avoid that of itself being a cause of the outbreak of rising prices again within the economy. If I look at it at the moment, levels of inflation within the economy are low, levels of credit growth within the economy are exceptionally low. So I believe that is a balance that we are getting okay at the moment, but we do need to in particular monitor what happens in prices and wages within the construction sector. And then in relation to how we could respond back to a disorderly Brexit, could and should that have a green dimension? I think there's certainly a case for looking at it. If I look at it very broadly and only from an economic point of view, but this isn't the way I tend to look at the issue, we of course would want to be trying to move parts of our economy into those that would be genuinely sustainable for the very, very long run. And of course it's obvious that in order to do that, how we respond that back to change in climate and playing our part in responding back to climate change will be what a sustainable industry looks like in the future.
Final questions from